what are like the pillars of your stance against Elon Musk? So your first point is that Elon Musk didn't start his company. The second point is that Hyperloop is stupid and Boring Company is stupid. And then your point is that the company is overall, you can go one by one, but like are overvalued, whether we're talking about Tesla or Boring Company. So I think that the appropriate way to handle these points is to start with the ones about whether the companies themselves are good or bad. Because if we were to answer the question about his skills or whether he did it and start his companies, I feel like those are further downstream from whether the companies themselves are good companies. For example, even if I convinced you that he did start his companies, it wouldn't be much of an argument to win there, because if we still think the companies themselves are stupid, then who cares if he started them, right? So I think the point to start with is whether his companies are or are not valuable, value creating companies. Do you agree from first principles that probably makes sense to start with? I think.
So what are the list of companies that he's been like listed as like the owner or whatever? It's like PayPal.
Yeah. So
It's
PayPal,
let's just run down like because
or like,
PayPal's good. PayPal's fine. There's nothing.
okay,
I
so
don't have any knocking.
Tesla,
Tesla.
SpaceX. He owns like Solar City. He owns
Mhm.
obviously Boring Company, Neuralink.
I think he
Yeah.
did. I think he did start Neuralink,
Yeah.
but PayPal for sure. Tesla he didn't start. SpaceX I actually don't know. He may have founded that, but
Got it.
yeah, it's just it's not it's like mostly inarguable, like one way or another, whether he literally founded a company or joined it on the board and then became the owner or whatever. That's like a
Mhm,
more kind of objective thing. But
mhm.
I think it's if you look at that, it's like, oh, it's interesting. Like he literally didn't even found these things that he's like, oh,
Yeah.
I this wouldn't exist without me. It's like some of them maybe
Okay.
wouldn't exist without his money.
We can bounce around from these like 5 points, but
Mhm.
I'm gonna try to focus first on the whether or not the companies themselves are what's the adjective, worthwhile, valuable,
Sure.
value creating.
Hmm.
I think really what the crux of what we're getting at is, are they value creating, are they helpful for customers or not?
They
And I
help. Are
see
they
that
helpful for? Are they helpful for society? I guess if they're
for
helpful for
society, yeah,
customers, I don't know. Maybe I don't know.
are they help,
I
they're
guess
helpful
that would
for
be something. If they're helpful for customers, I
society.
guess that would be good.
And then his ownership or responsibility or impact on on this companies is somewhat
Hmm.
secondary, because who cares, even if I can convince you that he is like truly the founder and innovator behind these companies, if
No,
companies are not.
if he's the founder and innovator behind these companies, then you've won. In my eyes, you've won.
No, because if you still think
Or
the
I
companies
guess you
themselves
have
are
won.
useless,
I think.
because if it's like
Mhm.
if you're the founder owner of a company that's horrible, not creating any value, that then that's my okay. So
Mhm.
my argument
But
is that
I
not
think he's
only
not
was
even
he,
smart enough to have done the thing. Some of which I think is bad. So some I think are bad,
yeah,
and some I think he didn't. He's not like the
yeah,
genius Tony Stark that some people think he
yeah.
is.
And I think he's a genius, and I think he did have a primary role not only in founding, but in developing these companies. And I think the primary thing, or at least equal in importance, is the fact that these companies are really valuable. Okay, so yeah, let's talk about Boring Company, Hyperloop, whether or not he started his companies, his technical skills, and whether or not these companies are overvalued. So Boring Company, you think it's stupid, they're drilling holes. I'm going to combine Boring Company and Hyperloop into one thing. So Hyperloop and
Sure.
Boring Company, your viewpoint is like, these companies are drilling holes in the ground. They're taking this like really simplistic idea of moving cars underground. It's stupid.
Mm-hmm.
They're diverting funds that could be used towards
Mm-hmm.
high speed rail and train, and they're moving it over. They're taking those funds and they're putting them into this stupid, idiot Hyperloop
Kind of
thing, which
commercializable,
is
but not really useful.
commercializable, single
Yeah.
lane. Diverting funds. They're not diverting funds. The idea of diverting funds is like, if someone gives you, they're raising money that people are giving to them that they're spending towards their company.
I don't
A
know if the state
government.
of California had
Okay.
money that they wanted to spend toward transportation. I'm pretty
Okay.
sure we can fact check,
So
but for now,
blame,
just
so blame the,
pretend this is
state of
true.
California.
Sure,
Yes.
you could blame California. You could blame Elon Musk. I don't know. Maybe it's fine, or whatever, right? If he promised something and then failed to do it, then you would say that blame him, right? If he made a reasonable case, if his business plan was in crayon, then it's
Uh-huh.
okay. Fuck California, that's on them. But if he made like a realistic business plan that he failed to follow through on, then it would be his fault. I think it was like a stupid idea from the get go. That it's just literally we're gonna drill.
If you're talking, when you say diverting funds, if you're talking about diverting
It's literally like
California
state
funds,
funds.
if the Gates Foundation has to, I don't know these, if the Gates Foundation had to donate $1 billion towards a cause, and with their team of 100 experts, they donated to, let's say, the wrong cause, that would be the fault of the Gates Foundation, not of the cause, right? Because it's up to, in this case, the state of California to make a decision about where to spend their money. And presumably, if the state of California makes decisions properly, then they did their homework and they decided that the high-speed rail Hyperloop Boring Company thing was a better investment than the alternative. And if you're saying they made the wrong decision, then that's a critique of California.
So if he was dishonest with how much he quoted as this would cost, because that's what a lot of it comes down
they
to.
can put him in jail or sue him or whatever. Like if he was dishonest, like you're making.
But if they could demonstrate that he was dishonest, I think so they did build one Hyperloop area that was for Vegas. That's, I don't know, several mile loop or something. And I think that ended up costing more. Construction costs more. I'm not saying that he should be criminally liable for whatever, but my general point is, it's, if people thought, some people's perspective of Elon Musk is he's the brilliant genius inventor of our time who's going to save the world. And if that's the perspective of, say, taxpayers of California, then it gives an incentive for California as a state to choose him to give the funds to. If the perspective was like, okay, he's got some interesting companies that he's worked on, but we need to take everything he says with a huge grain of salt because he comes up with some dumb fuck ideas. If that were the perspective of people more broadly, it would have been less likely that would have happened. So I'm not saying don't blame California, but I'm saying that this whole like mystique around his genius and how he's going to save the world, whatever, that I think that probably contributed to these funds going in that direction.
And why do you believe that the funds that went to his I'm looking over here at my notes, at his hyperspeed rail train single lane tunnel, how do you know that wasn't a good, what's your argument that says that's not a good investment versus the alternative? What is the alternative that you think they should have invested in?
Yeah, trains, so both above ground trains that connect up like a lot of the state that are relatively high speed, or like effective functioning subway systems are just empirically and like inarguably the most efficient ways to move things around. Compared to cars, it's just not even close. And congestion is really bad in LA, and getting up and down the state, the more cars you can take off the road and people don't have to be driving around either long distances or short distances has a really big impact.
Yeah.
But it's not something that you can necessarily make a huge amount of money off of, which seems like that's where he comes in. I haven't researched this deeply to say everybody's motives.
I don't need to be like diluting like what we're talking about, because I think there's a couple issues here within the Hyperloop topic. One is whether it's a good idea or bad idea. The second is whether he diverted funds from California. I think those are like two big questions, and kind of connected, not. And I think the primary question is, are these companies good ideas, good companies? So I guess the Boring Company and Hyperloop are distinct. To start with the Boring Company, because it's just written first on my notepad here, is you think it's stupid, they're drilling these holes, not going to do anything. So
no, I don't think it's necessarily stupid to drill holes, right? You need holes for subways, right? Somebody has to drill them. If they can drill it cheaper and more efficiently, whatever, than some other company, then that's awesome. If they do it more cost per distance tunnel, then that's not good, right?
Yeah, it's hard for me not to conflate like some of these topics, because I feel like central to all of your arguments is this, your thought of like how stupid he is, like tricking everyone into giving him money, and these things are overvalued. And I guess it's really hard to raise money. There's a lot of people with really great ideas who can't raise money, and it's a pretty high threshold to raise like millions or billions, especially billions of dollars. And so the mere fact that, let's say, the Boring Company has, I think of it when we spoke like a year ago, is like a $5 billion valuation, or however much money they raised, like they didn't trick anyone to giving them that money. Like these venture capital firms are not being tricked by anybody. That's like saying nobody's going to trick Bank of America to handing over $1 billion, right? That's not going to happen. You're going to have to go through all of their, otherwise why don't you go to Bank of America and trick them into giving you $1 billion? Like they have their due process. They have to check what you need the money for, and is it going to give them a return? And ultimately, these financial interest entities, the reason people think of like private equity or VC guys as being like very wealthy is because they are. Because
Mm-hmm.
on average, when they make investments, those investments pay off. Like these investment companies are out to make a profit.
Mm-hmm.
And they're only going to invest in the boring company only if they're really certain that they're going to make a huge return on their investment, or if they think they can. So it's like, I feel like you're calling in. I feel like I guess like I have a general acceptance of that system and how it operates, and I trust that if company XYZ raises X number of dollars, then the party that gave it to them is self-interested and is acting on the behalf of their own investors, and they're all trying to make money, and so they think that, so they probably know more than you do, and they think that boring company can make money because even
Mm-hmm.
though trains are a good idea, we need other ways of transportation, we need other ways to get around the country. That's what I think.
Whether a financial institution thinks that a company will make money, whether they think it's
Mhm.
a good idea or whether they think it is something that will help society or whatever, those are
Mhm.
really distinct questions. So
You think
do
so?
what
I actually don't think it is
100%.
distinct.
Yeah, of course.
For the company to make money, especially a consumer facing company, especially a consumer transportation company, the only way for that company to make money is if people, what? If they use it, if they use the Hyperloop or whatever product this boring company is making. That's the only way for the boring company to be successful, is if people get value from it.
If people, what do you mean when you say people? What do you mean people? Somebody has to give them money for it, right?
Yes.
That's what they
You
need.
consumers have to use the product.
So
The only
so
way for
here's
Apple to
like
make money,
mhm.
so the only way for Apple to make money is if the iPhone is so valuable that you want one, that when yours breaks, you buy a new one.
Mhm.
And when they get an upgrade, you go pay $600 and you get it because you don't want to live without it. Like that's how companies make money, is that consumers want to buy the stuff that they have.
Sure. So when I'm evaluating, like trying to do an apples to apples comparison, I'm not saying like, so if I complain about, I don't have an iPhone, I have Android, I've got complaints, whatever. But if I complain about my phone, I'm not
Mhm.
saying, oh, I wish this phone didn't exist. Because if this phone didn't exist, my life would be better. If I'm complaining
Yeah.
about my phone and I'm I really did want one with an aux port because I care about
Mhm.
being able to plug in a headphone. But if I could only find a phone that was like had a good battery life, whatever, but didn't have an aux port, and I was complaining about it not having an aux port, I'm not
Mhm.
saying I wish this company never existed or I wish it's just I wish phones didn't exist. I'm saying I wish it were better in this way. So when we're saying, okay, people will probably use the tunnels they build, maybe they will, but I'm not comparing not having the tunnel to having a tunnel. I'm comparing having a subway in that tunnel that transports, I don't know, whatever, 20,000 people per day at a
Mhm.
cost of $1 per person or cost per user of $2 per person or whatever
Mhm.
versus 1,000 people a
Yeah.
day at some higher cost for the
But what does
user.
that have to do with anything? So talking about the boring companies, I get your point about. I think it's a. We can talk more about the diverting funds from state of
Hmm.
California, but
So there's
okay,
like an
the boring.
opportunity cost of doing. It's not. I'm not saying we shouldn't do anything. I'm saying we should
Yeah,
do better things than worse
yeah.
things, right?
So let's talk about the boring companies specifically. If you and I were to start a company tomorrow, and it's and if someone were to come along and say, "Wow, what a stupid company! They're wasting their," and we'd say, "Okay, then go build that other company you want to build." Like when you're saying, "Oh, the boring company is stupid," then like if they are, then they'll fail. Like they'll run out
Hmm.
of money and they'll fail. But I don't understand the perspective about the boring company of they're not diverting any funds away from. If an investor is giving them money, who are you to tell the investor where they should put their money? Or like how are
Well, no.
you're saying,
So
oh,
okay. So
they could be
here's
investing in trains. What train company? Probably there is no proposal to build some subway system in wherever. You would need to show
mhm.
me, okay, there was this proposal to build
That
a
it's
subway.
plausible they could have done some. That there was some.
But like who's they? Who's they? Who's they? Like who's
Um,
the entity that was going to build said subway that then
that got
couldn't because this
outcompetes.
investment firm.
I don't. Yeah.
What?
So if actually, I don't know the name of
Yeah.
the
But
train
like,
company that got outbid, whatever, and then it
was
went to
there one?
Musk.
Yeah. So what? And if so, so the situation we would need to
But
make
like
your point
trains
is that
exist.
is
But here's my argument. I'm not saying that Bank of America, whatever, I'm sure it wasn't bank, whatever financial institutions
yeah.
who invested in Elon Musk. I'm not saying oh they were dumb or they're bad or whatever. I'm saying
Hmm.
that this broad societal idea that he's this brilliant genius who's going to fix everything,
Hmm.
that's responsible. That when you look at a company, whether anybody, whether a financial institution or an individual maybe has less capability to be rational about it, they might be more like, oh, I read one article and now I invested in Bitcoin. Or I saw one tweet of Elon Musk and I think this is going to be awesome. I invested in it. And then a financial institution looks at people doing that and they say, a lot of people are investing in this. That says something. That's meaningful for a company if individual people are doing that. And if you look at press about somebody and you say, oh, okay, people have some trust that this person is capable of doing this thing, and societal image, that's a big impact. So that overall societal view is responsible for inflating the value of the company. And if I think that that's
what company? What company? Which company? Are we still talking about the Boring Company?
I would say all of them: SpaceX, Boring, Tesla.
When you say okay, but this is a separate topic. Okay, my point on the Boring.
But I'm not saying the financial institution shouldn't evaluate the things they're going to evaluate, and they're going to do a better job than I could, right? They're going to look at all the metrics, right?
That's what they do, yeah.
But I'm saying that it's people who are seeing like, oh, he copied an iFunny meme from 10 years ago, and it's really funny, and I like it, and therefore I think that he's a genius. Whatever my reductive conception of a person who's like that, that's responsible for overinflating this individual. And I'm arguing that funds shouldn't flow in his direction because I don't think that he's a good steward of that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you can't make money. Yeah. I'm saying that I don't think he's like the stable genius who's gonna fix the world in these ways that a lot of people think that he will.
So you've transitioned to a different point, which is fine. I guess I do want to just like quickly in one sentence wrap up
hold me to it. Yeah.
The previous point on Boring Company. So I think for your point to be really strong regarding the Boring Company being a waste of funds, what you would need is an example of some entity that wanted to build a subway system, and they were competing with the Boring Company for a finite amount of funds, and these investment companies made the decision to take their finite funds and put it into the Boring Company, and then you need to prove that other train company then couldn't get funds. But that's not the situation at all. Like no part of that story is reality. I don't think there was a competing train company, and if there was, there's not really such thing as like a finite pool of funds. There's lots of investors. If that train company or subway system, whatever, was a good idea, then investors would have picked up on it in the same way that they picked up on the Boring Company. So just like the whole story that would need to exist for it to be valid that the Boring Company somehow diverted funds, like there was like multiple steps that just didn't happen, and more importantly, I don't think that's how the system works.
Did they not happen, or are the two of us just ignorant on the details of that?
Here's my point distilled. If there was some entity, whether it's a government or a company, that had some efficient subway system that they could build, and that company went to investors with a pitch just like the Boring Company did, then presumably those investors or other investors would have given that company money for the same reasons that they give the Boring Company money, right?
So if it's a financial institution, I don't expect for them to do any kind of moral calculus, right? It's their job not to, right? But if it's a state, and this is a fair argument to say, if the state had some level of corruption, or if they didn't evaluate this in a reasonable way with respect to their stakeholders of their citizens, and rather they were looking at some other consideration, then it's fair to say, okay, that's on the state. And maybe that's where more of the blame should lie than Musk. But
let's talk about the Boring Company.
I can still say that this is a dumb idea.
Do you think that here's like a I think more fundamental question. Do you think that investors are rational actors?
I think a large financial institution is probably more rational than like individual investors.
Yeah. Like, do you think that they are efficient in acting in their own best interest?
I think they're if they still exist, then they're efficient enough to not not have died. Right.
When the Boring Company comes to them, and whatever other transportation company came to them, and they both said, "Hey, we want your money."
Wait,
that
But it wasn't a
rational
financial. It wasn't a
institution.
financial institute. We're talking about the
Well,
state of California.
you're talking about for the hyperloop. I'm saying for Boring Company. I think it was private.
Oh, sure,
Yeah.
sure. For the
Yeah.
funding.
So when you
Yeah.
go to the financial investor, but it's the same with the government. Like, I'm just saying, if we believe that these people are rational actors, they make mistakes, but they're ultimately out to, in the case of the government, they're out to help people. In the case of the investor, they're out to make money, which you can really only do with a consumer product if you're helping people. Otherwise, the people
I
won't buy
don't.
your product.
Wait. Okay. So this is something that like I don't think anybody believes, right? So soda companies, right? You can argue that. Let's go
They don't help.
cigarettes, right? You can
Let's
argue
go to
they help
transportation.
people.
Let's
Maybe
go to
there's something to it.
transportation.
I don't know, but it's not a fact that companies just definitionally help their users, right?
You're right. No, sorry. So transportation. So let me make the statement simpler. Not sim- Let me reduce it. So customers have to be willing to pay for a product because they want it. Whether you want a soda, so you buy $2 for a soda because that soda to you is more valuable than the $2 in your pocket, and so you trade the $2 because you'd rather have the soda. You want whatever the product is more than the amount of money it costs. If it costs $10, you wouldn't do it because you value $10 more
Right.
and the cost of the soda. It's called like consumer willingness to pay. So that's how companies usually price their product. It's not about
Yep.
it has to be above whatever the marginal cost of the product is. As long as it's above that, they choose the price based on how much is the person willing to pay for this. So you go to a restaurant, the beer costs $10 because that's what you're willing to pay for it. So in the case of transportation, the consumers, how much they're willing to pay is how much they want it. So and so you're right. It's distinct from
But
necessarily helping society. But
here's the analogy there is that if you go to a restaurant, you're willing to pay $10 for beer because they won't allow you to bring in your own beer, right? So by analogy, somebody who, let's say some Hyperloop, I don't know if I think they were planning to build in downtown LA. I don't know if parts of that have gotten built. I'm not sure. But let's say hypothetically that gets built. There's some stretch of some number of miles that there's like Hyperloop, so you can go underground, or it has an elevator that brings you underground. I don't know. However it works,
no.
and you use it, and hey, people are using it. It can't be that bad. People can't hate it that much. But people don't have the option of saying, if there were like a nice subway, and I know there is some amount of subway in downtown LA, say some other part that doesn't have any subway, or a better subway, a more functional subway, people don't have the option of doing that instead because it doesn't exist, because they only have that option. So you can't simply just look at, oh, people are using it and say it's good or it's good enough. You could argue that it's better than nothing. Maybe if you want to argue that nothing would have been done and it's okay, maybe Hyperloop isn't the best thing, but they did something and maybe nothing would have been done if not for him. And there's an argument for Tesla that, that he's pushed EVs forward. I think there's a strong argument that he's pushed EVs forward and that it's not like anybody could have done it. Right? I think there's a strong argument there.
Yeah, so there could be a subway system that's better than the Boring Company, sure. But I guess what's the point there? So if you and I start a company tomorrow and we're selling dining room tables and someone comes along and is, you guys are taking advantage of investors because investors could be investing in better dining room tables and your tables only have 3 legs and the best dining room tables have 4 legs. Like, how dare you guys start this company? We'd be like, dude, you're making like an axiomatic problem here. Like, we're allowed to start whatever company we want. And if people like the product, they'll buy it. And if they don't, they won't buy it. And if people like the product, investors will buy it. And if people don't like it, then investors won't buy it. Wouldn't that be absurd? If you and I started a dining room table company, and it was a silly idea to have 3-legged dining room tables, and someone approached you and they said, "What a stupid idea! You are wasting investment money." That's an axiomatic fallacy on many levels. One level is like, mind your own business. We're gonna start whatever company we want, and if we fail, it's our money, it's our investment. And don't accuse us of taking money from investors. If they choose to give us money, it's because they think it's a good product. So who would imagine, Socrates, you and I, use this example. We start a 3-legged dining room table company, and someone comes along and says, "Oh, you guys are doing something like wrong," like how would you respond? You'd say, "What's it to you if we start this company?"
Sure, if it's dining room
That's the whole point
tables
of the
that
free
don't
market
really
economy. It's
affect.
like the best ideas win.
Uh-huh.
Like the whole point of this, I think there might be a really fundamental thing we disagree with, which is I believe that we have an efficient market, that capitalism is good, that we have a free market economy. Good ideas generally rise to the top and win, and bad ideas generally lose. Yes, there's cigarette companies where it's creating this negative externality and it's harming people. That's a different situation. But with transportation, we're not talking about negatively harming people. I think at the worst, what we're talking about is a premium product where some people can't afford it. And you could argue that, you know,
Wait, does transportation have negative externalities that harm people?
no,
Or let's say cars, right?
CO2 probably, but that's not. But that wasn't part of
CO2,
your point.
people
Yeah,
people
but you
can
weren't talking
die
about
from
that.
being in them,
Yeah, but
getting hit by them, or
that's
like
not what you're. That's
or
no,
like
no.
not wearing
That's not
seatbelts or
the
not having
example.
seatbelts. So the car companies fought against having seatbelts, right?
I'm curious what you think about my table example. I'm curious what you think about my dining room table
I
example.
think so. If you say this is a silly idea, then that's fine. And if you say boring Hyperloop, this is a silly idea I had, then that's fine. We're just saying, oh, this is if people are seriously saying this is going to revolutionize transportation, I'm looking at it and I'm saying this is like a really inefficient way to move people around, then why shouldn't I say that?
No, well, no, because you're doing more than saying that. You're saying like that they committed a sin like the argument about diverting funds to me is like
Well, so with the table example, there's a million tables you can buy. It's just not a good analogy for the situation, I would argue,
what do
because
you
there's a
think the
million
investment
tables out there that you can already buy.
I accidentally okay.
What are those
What do
three-legged
you
chairs?
if what? Yeah.
One of those three-legged chairs.
If I brought on like the lead investor of the Boring Company right now and he joined us in this stream, what would you say to him?
I believe that you will interview him one day. First of all, by the way.
Yeah.
Good
I
vibes.
don't know who it is. Yeah,
We're gonna find out who it is. You're gonna interview him.
Yeah.
If it'd be interesting to hear if he had a pitch of okay, this is why. Okay, so again, separating out like Boring Company drilling holes, but like Hyperloop. That's really the meat of what we're talking about. Is okay, this is why this is good. If he could make a compelling case to me, then it's not like I wouldn't listen to it. I'm just like, oh, I hate Elon Musk.
What would you, not him say to you, what would you
What would I
if
say
he
to
joined
him?
the stream right now? Yeah, right now, if he were to join the stream. Because guess what? Behind this curtain.
I would say to him, I would say, okay, why did you join this company? Did you think that you were saving the world when you did this, or
You mean why? You'd say why did you invest in this company?
wait, you said the CEO or
If you talk to an investor,
an investor?
an
Oh,
investor
okay.
of the Boring Company, someone that invested.
I'd be curious. I'd be curious to know why they invested, but I wouldn't hold their feet to any kind of fire. The person who invests because he thought it was going to make them money, obviously.
And so you at least agree that the investors believe that the
Of
Hyperloop
course,
would be more
yeah.
successful. Okay. And so your argument, I think, is that
Well,
Hyperloop would have probably helped left.
they believe that Boring Company would make them money. Whether they believed Hyperloop was a good idea, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a separate question.
And then the way that they make money from that is by people using the thing, by people taking their car and going on the loop. And
If I invest in a company to make money, that stock has to go up in value. That's the only thing technically that's required. So I'm not saying that everybody's doing a pump and dump, but if you want to go like reductive, like there are people who surely bought, Dogecoin when Elon Musk tweeted about it because they were looking around and they saw, oh, all these Elon Musk fanboys, they're also going to invest. I'm going to invest now, then they're going to invest. I'm going to remove my investment and I'm going to have more money after. They don't have to believe it's good. They just have to believe that other people believe it's good.
Okay, two points there. One is that I think it's usually illegal for investors to just like sell whenever they want. Like if you're an executive at a public company, for example, and a company goes public, you can't just sell whenever.
Wait,
you
are you
want.
saying investor or executive? Those
Either
are different.
one. There's regulations around when people can sell stock. When
Elon Musk has been fined, cited, citation from the FTC for stock manipulation. Right, so that's even something that he's specifically been liable for.
Yeah, so that's a separate point, but it proves what I'm saying, which is that when you do things that are wrong or illegal, you should usually get caught or in trouble for them.
Sure.
My whole point.
Yeah.
He's been held accountable when he's
doing I don't think that's like That's, oh, look, he's been cited for clear stock manipulation, or they argued stock manipulation, whatever, however you feel about it. Therefore, oh, clearly the system works. If he did anything else wrong, they would have held him accountable. If there's the classic scenario of a mob boss going down from like not paying taxes correctly or something like that, some like minimal thing when you know that he's like masterminded lots of murders, or there's like the Trump trial, whatever. So this idea that we can say, oh, this person has been held liable for this thing, and therefore he can't have done anything else that's bad in this realm, or he would have been held liable. I don't think that argument makes sense.
The original point you were making was the original question was about the investor. How do they make money? You're talking about stocks and what if they pump and dump, and now you're talking about Elon Musk, and now like you divert. There's 3 different tangents, like Elon Musk and what he could have done.
But you said, but he was held liable for that, so he can't have done other things wrong in the same way.
I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying that at all. That's a different point. My point is that no, we can't say that investors can often make money by pump and dump schemes. There's so much regulation.
Well,
people.
Wait.
There's different schemes you can do, but what I'm saying is that, frankly, the bigger thing I want to say is that when you said that investors make money when the stock goes up, so a stock only has value if there's an exit, if the company goes public, or if it gets sold. Unless we're talking about a biotech company, for a transportation company like the Boring Company to go public and be worth $20 billion, it's got to be making a shitload of money.
That's not true.
The way that it makes it is true. I think it's true. Probably.
No, let me see. When it comes to, I don't know, like Instagram, like TikTok, just truly some of the biggest companies out there.
Those are advertising companies.
Sure.
They make money. So they don't have to turn on their revenue engines until they want to. But when they went public, they had 40 million users. The only way for the Boring Company to have 40 million users and not make any money, which, by the way, if they did that, then sure, they'd have to be offering transportation for free. In which case they're still creating value. But also we're talking about some niche. You're saying like maybe the investors aren't really rational actors, that they're criminals and they want to like manipulate the market. All I'm trying to say,
I'm not saying he's a criminal market manipulator. I just think people are falling for a ruse.
That's a silly thing for you to. So I guess a fundamental disagreement we have is I believe that, for the most part, there's an efficient market, that the good companies survive. The companies that products people, when people want the products, the company survives. If they don't, the company dies. So companies live or die based on customer demand. That's what I believe for the most part. There's exceptions to that, but those are exceptions. People do fraudulent things. Those are exceptions. They hopefully get in trouble for those things. And so, largely speaking, the only way for a company to be successful is if the customer wants to buy their product, even if it is, like you said, like a soda where it's not good for you. And so I just typically trust that, if a company like Boring Company has raised a lot of money, it's because the people that investigated it the most thoroughly discovered that there's a lot of value to be had here. It's not to say that, I guess where I agree, I think, with what you're saying is, like, theoretically, I would bet that if there was some massive subway system, that more people could be in a subway system than could be in their car in a tunnel. Probably, if we're talking about number of people, that feels right. But then, so I think I agree. If we're gonna say, what do we think could help more people? But if we're saying, but then it's not a connection to go from there to saying the Boring Company like diverted funds or this or that, because diverted funds from what? Like my guess is that there was no other company that had a better idea, that was able to come up with a plan to build and implement a massive subway system. I guess that's my point also.
It's possible. It's possible that at that moment, no company, it was like a train company, had a viable bid. That's entirely possible. Right. You don't know that. I don't know that. Obviously, I'm spouting off without having all the information.
But typically, like, competition's a good thing. Like, the more transportation you have, the easier it is for the next company to come in, or like the more people are used. Like, competition is good because the more plausible it is for other complementary technologies to come on board, or now people are used to going out to Palm Springs to get on the train. So when you build a second subway there, There's already more people there. We want transportation. We want competition, so that people have to come up with better and better ideas. If it weren't for
Yeah.
if it weren't for the Samsung phone, Apple wouldn't be as good because they would have nothing to compete with. And you only buy an Apple if it's better in some way than Samsung. And if it's not, Apple will go out of business because everyone will buy Samsung. And so somehow the Boring Company or Hyperloop was able
wait,
to
okay, so this
offer-
is, I think Apple is actually a great example of a company that is also overvalued in certain domains, right? So Apple has been able to place itself within the public eye as it's like if you want to be a creative professional, if you want to read emails at a Starbucks, you need an Apple computer. And I really like Macs in a lot of ways. I really like the operating system. I like it better than Windows in a lot of ways. I don't like that they took off the HDMI ports, although they're putting them back on some. But that's a perfect example of a company that has, through marketing, convinced people who don't really need it to desire it. So I'm not saying that
What do you mean?
people don't buy the thing that they desire and are willing to pay money for. I'm trying to splash some cold water on people's
Okay.
desires. In the same way that I would be saying, look, I know that people are buying cigarettes because they want cigarettes. I'm saying that you shouldn't want cigarettes.
Okay, so why don't you stop using your iPhone then? Your smartphone then?
Well, I have an Android.
Why don't you stop using your smartphone?
Why don't I stop? Why would I stop using it?
Because you just said that you don't need it, or it's not helpful, or it's all marketing, right?
No, if somebody needed a personal computer to check their email out on the go, or I don't know, they needed a bigger screen to do that, whatever, I would advise them to buy like a much cheaper laptop than anything that Apple offers.
Yeah.
But Apple has positioned itself as like the default. They've gone from like luxury to default. That's a company that did an unbelievable marketing job, and Steve Jobs did an unbelievable job at marketing. And he's a brilliant example of somebody who he's actually, he was a brilliant person. He was really smart, but he didn't create the technology of Apple. That was Steve Wozniak, who was his friend, who was actually building these things. They were doing some of that together, but he was doing the innovation. He was doing most of the technology, and Jobs was the marketing guy. And I think that's closer to where Musk is. I think that Elon Musk is more of a Steve Jobs than a Steve Wozniak.
Okay. Yeah.
And so you could say Apple wouldn't exist without Steve Jobs, and that's probably true. But you can't say that our world is in a better place because look at all these people have Apple computers when it's possible that whatever that kind of unknown thing that Steve Wozniak was doing, maybe that could have grown into a movement of more people learning how to put together computers, or some cheaper, more utilitarian alternative that could have grown out of that, or more people learning to use Unix or whatever, something open source, right?
So show me the company that Boring Company or Hyperloop won funding over, and we can have a conversation about that. But otherwise, I don't think I would say your argument's incomplete. That Boring Company
It's absolutely
/ Hyperloop-
incomplete, sure.
Yeah. I think it's a hypothetical. I think it is a big if. If it's like a nice hypothetical argument. If there was a company who was competing for investment funds, and another assumption, and there was a finite amount of that investment pool, which there might not be, by the way. For all intents and purposes, there might not have been a finite amount because
it's possible. It's possible that could be. That's certainly somewhat inelastic or somewhat elastic.
Here's what I mean. Here's what I mean by that. Maybe investors had the appetite to put in $30 billion, but they couldn't find enough companies to invest in for transportation, and so they only doled out $5 billion to Hyperloop. There's we don't know that there was some bottleneck. Okay, so that's the point about Boring and Hyperloop. Do you agree it's not we would need that data to have it be a complete?
Yeah. To make that a full argument, I would want to say, okay, here's the bidding, here's the company that could have. So even if there wasn't a company existing at that moment that could have done that, the fact that when I was mentioning the opportunity cost, there's something to be said for moving fast. You've got something existing, maybe you go with that, whatever. But there's a situation, I'm sure you've experienced this, where you're doing some kind of like brainstorming for how should we proceed with some project, whatever, and somebody raises their hand and gives like a not very good idea,
Hmm.
but it's something and people roll with it, and they're just like,
Hmm.
okay, let's go with that. Sometimes there's times in life when you just need to take something and move forward. There's times in life to wait a little bit and have an actually like functional idea to go ahead with. And it can feel, depending on the situation, it can feel heartbreaking for somebody to propose and then everybody goes with and rolls with a really bad idea when there could have been something a lot more functional. So even if there was
Yeah.
nothing right at the moment, that train company that was making a bid that off the bat would have been better, the fact that there's this company that is saying we got to do this and there's a lot of like media momentum behind it, that does take, at the very least, it takes airtime away. It takes, people aren't going to follow 100 different companies that are all doing things, or seed companies or ideas for seed companies that are all doing something. If some company is doing it, it does take air away. There is a finite amount of investment eyes on different things to go around.
So I guess we'll see what. Look, either the Boring Company and Hyperloop are going to create massive value for a lot of people, or they're going to go out of business. Those are the two options. And
Mm-hmm.
so, if they create massive value for a lot of people, then I guess you'll, in this case, be wrong. And if they go
Mm-hmm.
out of business, then you might also be wrong, because then, like, the investors will be able to invest somewhere else,
Mm-hmm.
or people will have learned. I guess you'd be right, but see what I'm saying, like, they're not gonna
Well,
suck
here's
funds away
here's
forever. Like, people, they're either gonna
here's the
fail
thing.
or.
Here's the thing. If they fail, 10 years down the line, whatever, say, it never
Mhm.
materializes until a really profitable enough thing for it to become like a
Mhm.
self-sustaining company, whatever. The investment runs out and they're like, okay, we got to shutter it. Then
Mhm.
it's not okay. We found out at the end that didn't work. It's
Mhm.
that there's all of this time that rail technology that already
Yeah.
exists, not as sexy, but it exists. It's there. It's
Yeah.
efficient. Could have
Uh-huh.
been taking cars off the road, CO2 not going into the atmosphere
It's
that
again,
entire
if
time.
that were the case, but it's like the way that the whole idea of an efficient market is that there's so many people in this country, in this economy, that it's really hard for you or I to start a company.
Mm-hmm.
Because the moment that you think of a really good technology, you're like, oh my God, I have such a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
It's $1 billion idea. The odds are someone else has thought of it. And if it's truly a good idea, then they would have developed it and built it and raised money. And if they haven't, it's because there's some fundamental problem with the idea that somehow it won't scale, or it doesn't really solve the need in the market or whatever. But the whole idea of this efficient market that we live in is that we have millions of people in this country, and when there's a genuinely good idea, someone jumps onto it, or 50 people jump onto it, and one of them is able to create a successful company. So if there were some mass subway system idea that was profitable and could be a real business, then someone should do it, or has done it, or hasn't done it. But it's, you see what I'm saying? Like,
Mm-hmm.
if what's your, okay, here's a great example. Like, why haven't there been any of these new subway systems in other states? Is Hyperloop and Boring Company also responsible for any absence of a subway system elsewhere?
No, I don't think it's.
Right.
I don't think it's responsible for everything that's not happening everywhere in the world.
Right, but
But I
like,
think
right, so like, but
there.
if.
I think this idea that there's, so looking at transportation again, electric cars or something was like starting to grow in the, I don't know, in like the 40s or 50s or 60s or something.
Mhm.
This has been around for a long time, and the technology, I might be spewing misinformation. Fact check everything I'm saying, but the car companies like were able to kill these technologies because they didn't want
Mhm.
competition. In the same way that fossil fuel industries are not necessarily happy about alternative energy sources. In some cases, they are, and they're like, we'll move into that. But they've known about climate change for a long time. They've tried to prevent people from moving off of oil and natural gas. So I, it's one thing to say the market is like efficient, In some senses, it's unbelievably efficient, but to say that it gets to, there's a huge difference between like sometimes profitable ideas and good ideas, like good for consumers, good for the world, are the same thing, and sometimes they're not. Right? What's the phrase? Something planned, not planned obsolescence. There's planned obsolescence. There's the fact that like appliances break more often now than they used to, and that's like a decision that companies made to make things less durable. That made it so you can't repair certain things, and those are regulations they've argued for. So there's lots of ways that companies can try to make things uncompetitive, and so you can't just carte blanche say, oh, everything is competitive. Like the market works very efficiently in certain ways, but there's ways that companies can take information out of the market, out of being considered by the market, and then it can't optimize on those efficiencies at all.
Okay. Yeah, again, I'd need to see if there was a viable business proposal to build a subway system, and if not, why there wasn't. Boring Company won out. Or to put it another way, let me ask you this question: if in fact Hyperloop / Boring Company won fundraising over some other entity that was proposing massive subway system, then my question to you is, how or why did they win that money over that subway system?
That's a good question. I have no idea.
What do you think?
I'm just talking on my ass.
But this is your whole argument. Your whole argument is that Hyperloop / Boring Company, in some fashion, was awarded money over the diverted California funds over some subway system. And my question is why? And I guess to make the argument for you, you would say that they're maybe more profitable for the investors, or they've convinced the investors, to which I would just say that's darn stupid, probably.
So I just looked this up. So Hyperloop 1 was like the company. So it was a company, and it was terminated. I don't know if that means that the whole like Hyperloop concept is dead. I don't know exactly.
Yeah.
But the Hyperloop company is dead. It was supposed to go from Greater Los Angeles to San Francisco.
It's not either or. I think companies do want to do high-speed train. Also, to your point about Elon Musk, whether or not he started his companies, so he started PayPal, SpaceX, Tesla.
No, he didn't start PayPal, right?
He's one of the founders, I think. He and Peter Thiel, I think, were. And then whether we're going to split hairs around, and I think that's connected to your point about his technical skills, and then the final point is whether his companies are overvalued. Whether or not he's the founder / his technical skills, I think, are connected. But whether or not he's the official founder or not, I think fundamentally with these 6 companies, PayPal, Tesla, SpaceX, SolarCity, Boring Company, and Neuralink, he's fundamental to the companies, whether he's been a founder or the founder or a primary role. People who've worked with him firsthand say, and I've showed you these articles like a year ago, they say that he's very technical. He's so, from any available observable metric, he's so clearly ingrained in these companies, or he was, and now he's balancing things. And he's so obviously incredibly technical. I don't understand how you wouldn't agree with those points. He built video games when he was like 11 years old. He's an engineer by trade. And
he built some. I think I looked at this actually, and it was like not a big deal. I don't know. I don't want to like. I'm not saying he's not smart. I'm not right. So this is the same thing. Like Steve Jobs he was a genuinely brilliant man, and he was building computers at the same time as Steve Wozniak, but he's not responsible for the technical innovations of Apple. That goes on to more Steve Wozniak and developers at the time. And it's a misconception that some people have that Steve Jobs was like in there innovating all this stuff. That's something that's pretty well understood in retrospect, right, with Steve Jobs. I think so. So I guess this would be whether these companies like become profitable or not. Like any company can become profitable, like conceivably. They might pivot and do something totally different. I'm not prognosticating that all these companies will fail or that they'll even never amount to anything or whatever. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that I think when the kind of historical retrospect that we have now more with Steve Jobs, when that is eventually applied to Elon Musk, that he will be more of a Jobs than a Wozniak. The idea that he is doing these crazy innovations in in Tesla and SpaceX and all these companies himself, or that he's like the main kind of like mind, like putting together these technical innovations for like engines and different things. And so he didn't fund PayPal, or he didn't found PayPal. He didn't found Tesla. I don't know about SpaceX, but Tesla was these guys who built this car, and he bought the company. PayPal, he founded like X.com, which merged with Confinity, which is the guy who created, like, those were the PayPal founders that did like the technical innovations. So this is his track record that he, I think, has tried to hide. I think didn't he like something come out? I don't know if I was able to ever confirm this, but that he lied about his degree, that he actually like lied for 27 years about his credentials, does not have a BS in physics or any technical field, did not get into a PhD program. I'll send you this.
I don't know if yeah.
But the fact that he's shady about this, the fact that he's hiding all this stuff, the fact that he's saying that he's the founder of all these different things that he maybe played some role in, but isn't the technical founder when it comes to these technologies, to me, that all points to the idea that he is, and I don't think anybody could argue that he's not concerned about image or people seeing him as smart to a very large degree. The idea that he could be lying about how smart he is or how much he's contributed to the technology, at least some of that I think is within the public view. And the idea that it goes deeper, to me, seems like more than plausible.
Yeah, whether or not he's the literal founder or not, like Tesla, he bought the company.
Well, somebody else made a car, and he bought the company, and he liked the tech.
Okay.
But the car existed before him.
Anyone that's observed any of his companies or been part of them will say that he's been fundamental to their growth and to their
fundamental to their growth, maybe into their success. Sure. I'm not disputing. I'm not disputing that.
Right.
But the idea that he is the technical innovator, in terms of
there's thousands of people that work at the company.
Agreed. Exactly. Yeah.
But if anyone's there's thousands of people that are writing code, and it's like, what is a country? What is a company? Like you say, the United States is a great country. What do you mean? Like which people? Like we say, to the extent that any CEO is an impactful CEO, Elon Musk is an impactful CEO. If you're gonna say that he doesn't add value or he's not like the one, it's just a silly argument to make, because you're just saying no CEO. I think the better question is what's the CEO that's like more impactful or more value creating? Because you could say the same thing about any CEO. Mark Zuckerberg, he's not writing the code, so he's not the one creating the invention. If you're gonna make
Mark Zuckerberg actually did write like the original code for Facebook. He actually wrote it.
The app that he made, for the little social media app in 2001 or whatever year. That sure, but that he's not the one writing the code since then, nor should he be, because he's the CEO. So I guess the comment of what he's not I don't know who. It's like what is a company? What is a country? How do you decide who's the one innovating? And I guess I would just say, to the extent that any CEO creates value and contributes to the technological innovation, Elon Musk certainly does. And what's an example of a CEO that you think is more elemental to the innovation than Elon Musk?
The fact that Mark Zuckerberg created the technological thing and then created a company out of it, to me, indicates that he has at least the capacity to contribute at that level. Is there any example that you can give of Elon Musk ever creating a technology and then creating a company based on that?
Yes, but when you say create, it's if I start a company, what difference? Are you saying if I start a company and I hire 10 developers to code the product, that I didn't create the product because I didn't write the code?
If you want to say I was instrumental in this existing, it wouldn't have happened without me, that's fine. But it's a totally different thing to say, oh, look at me, I'm Tony Stark, right? Which is the conception that I think that clearly a lot of people have of Elon Musk.
So what is this an example of a CEO that you think has been more instrumental in the technological innovation? You said Mark Zuckerberg. So my response is that he created the 1.0 app where you match with a girl, or a girl you say who you like or whatever, some
Mm-hmm.
kind of dating app basically, which like he created in a few weeks. Like that wasn't it wasn't even his idea. It was the Winklevoss brothers'
Mm-hmm.
idea. So it was a really easy app to build, technically really easy to build, and it wasn't his idea. So how is that technical innovation? Like how is that how is that an example of a good technological innovation?
I don't have this conception in general that the person who is the figurehead of a company is doing the technical innovation. But that's the case for Elon Musk. That's how a lot of people view him as
Yeah,
he's
it's like,
inventing all
but
this
I can say,
rocketry stuff. He's
no, but that,
inventing he's down there, showing them how to tune up Teslas.
yeah. So, but then your problem is more like how people look at CEOs than it is about
Yeah.
Elon Musk. You could say the same thing about the government. People say, "Oh, the president, what a great country. We love this
I
president. We
think
hate
that's a
this
huge
president. We hate this
issue.
country."
Yeah. People think that the
And
president is responsible basically for the price of gas and like how the
yeah,
economy is doing when they have
yeah,
a
so the
much
big
more
company,
limited role. So I think that's a
yeah,
perfect analogy.
the big company, lots of people doing lots of different things. You
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't take credit away from like engineers, but to the extent that any CEO is contributing to technological innovation, Elon Musk certainly is. And I think the better, rather than saying, what about this engineer, that engineer, it's how does he compare to other CEOs? And I would argue that he's more technical and he's more involved than other CEOs. From what I've read about his impact in the Tesla manufacturing or the sort of supply chain, to
So
him being
there's
involved.
so this goes both ways. So there's ways that he's involved that he's saying really dumb stuff. So when it comes to the Cybertruck,
Mhm.
there was this thing that I don't know if it leaked. I don't know exactly like how this came out, but it was like, oh, there's this issue that because of this stupid shape that it's this like dumb box with all these straight lines, any imperfections are really obvious. And so the tolerances had to be like within 1 micron, which is just not feasible. And he's coming up with this. When he is coming up with designs, it's like that Simpsons episode where Homer Simpson is like coming up with a car. That's what Elon Musk did with the Cybertruck. He drew some dumb thing and he's forcing people to build it, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and it's
And
not
all these
working.
idiots
And
are
he's
building it,
saying,
and all these idiots are buying it, and all the investors are. What a stupid country, huh? All these
yeah,
idiots are
look,
buying
I
it,
mean,
and
if you wanna,
why don't you like take all your money and short Tesla? Really take everything you own, sell everything you own, and just short the Tesla stock, and you'll become rich.
look, if this
You're
dream takes off and enough people watch this and are convinced of my idea, then that would make sense to do. It might be market manipulation at that point if I'm like really good at doing it, but I'm arguing that people should
no,
value
you
it
don't need
less.
people. You don't need people to you don't need other people to short the stock for you to make money. I'm saying if you believe the company will fail, then you should short the stock, and you will gain. Because if you bet against the stock and the stock goes down, you'll make money. You don't need other people to watch this stream because your argument is that the company will fail on its own.
So there's a difference between some. This goes back to this fundamental idea of whether something is a good or bad idea, whether it's profitable, whether a stock goes up, stock goes down. There are people posting videos of themselves putting their fingers in the path of the Cybertruck trunk closing and crushing their fingers. There are people doing that. I think that's something that I wouldn't be proud of. I'm not going to disparage anybody for just if you want to make a car or a truck or whatever that I think isn't that good and somebody else wants to buy and they buy it. And I think in person, honestly, they look cool. I've seen them in like different cities now and they look cool. I think there's clear technical issues. I think it's fine for me to disparage the kind of ways that he's trying to innovate that are clearly stupid. So when it comes to electronics in the Cybertruck, there was some like technical report that they put out that was saying like, oh, we don't have to have this whole wiring harness because we're doing basically a serial instead of parallel circuit. And that means that it shorts very easily. And people have done technical analyses and they said, this is a there's a reason that this works this way for a reason. And they do short out very easily. And you can't take them in car washes. You can't wash them while the sun's out or it'll damage the exteriors because it's
Yeah,
unpainted stainless steel.
Okay,
There's lots for me to say this is stupid, and I think that he's dumb for having built this, but I'm not going to say that people shouldn't be allowed to buy it or build it.
okay, yeah, and then so the final point are his let's say Tesla, is Tesla overvalued in your opinion? You said yes, right? That's your
Yeah.
big.
But here's the thing.
I
A
mean,
company
I
that
guess
is overvalued has money, and they may be able to leverage that and do something with it. So the fact that something is a bubble, sometimes bubbles don't, sometimes they don't burst, or sometimes they don't burst for a really long time. So to say, oh, we should short it because if you think it's a bad idea, it's surely going to fail soon, that just doesn't follow.
What do you mean if? I guess.
Right, like during
Uh,
the early 2000s, there were like internet bubble companies,
like
and a lot of those companies made a ton of money. And then at some point, the music stops, and then they all fail because they were all overvalued. But some of them were able to persist during the period of time when that valuation didn't plummet.
okay, so I guess what's Tesla valued as? So Tesla's valued at $587 billion.
Hmm.
Why is it valued at $570 billion? Is it not worth that much? And in which case, so in a literal sense, it literally is worth that much because that's the stock.
Yeah, agreed.
That is the literal value in the same way that your house costs whatever house, your clothes cost whatever they cost. Like that's the price of the
Exactly, yeah,
company.
agreed.
So either you don't trust, you don't believe in like the financial system, or what?
To some degree, I don't believe in the financial system. I don't think anybody who thinks about it in that perspective believes in it, right? It's the valuation of a company is the trust of the market, which is people, right? Those valuations can go up and down very quickly. It doesn't mean that I think that that it's like magic that those numbers go up and down. There's things that cause that, but
Well, one of the big things that cause
Mhm.
that is the number one thing is revenue. So Tesla made $81 billion in 2022, and they made $97 billion in 2023. So people paid Tesla a total of $97 billion in 2023. Were they all stupid?
So
Were they
2024, their net income is down like 55%.
Okay, which is still in the billions, which is
Sure, but just if you bring it, profits cut in half as demand falls, and maybe they'll adapt, and that's fine. But just if we're gonna if we're gonna talk numbers, then
where does it
maybe I'm reading this wrong.
which,
I don't know. Year. If you just Google Tesla profits, you get this whole sheet. I might be reading this wrong. I don't know. But it says I'm seeing articles do net income, profits sink, profits cut in half. Yeah.
where's that?
Here I can send. But it's just I think compared to last year, it's down like 55%.
No, it's not.
It looks like it is.
Cut in half as demand falls. Which profit is cut in half?
The net income, profit margin, operating income.
Okay, yeah. So anyway, so even if okay, so that would have brought it to 50 or 40, $50 billion instead of.
If I shorted it recently, then I would have made a ton of money. Actually, yeah. Fuck.
Look, it's a very valuable company. The stocks went up. It's gone down a bit. I just
my critiques with Tesla are much more measured because I think they've done a lot of good by bringing a lot of EVs to market. I think there's issues with how heavy their cars are. So there's a diminishing returns. So embodied carbon in Teslas is higher than what I think other models of EVs can be. And that puts a limit on how effectively they can combat climate change. But I think they are doing good by existing. Part of that is there's a large subsidy. I think it's like $7,500 or something for an EV. And that's when you come to a policy question. These are policy. So financial institutions can be efficient. They can be rational within certain parameters. Policy is a lot more nebulous, right? Because this is politicians deciding what they think some mix of their constituents and the people who pay for their reelection funds will want from them, or it'll seem like they'll want from them, or plus what they think will actually do good for people. And when it comes to the fact that we've decided to subsidize EVs but not hybrid vehicles, which might be like a shorter route to more reduction in carbon, I have a much more measured critiques of Tesla. When it comes to the Cybertruck, I think there's lots of things that are dumb about it, but there's only 4,000 or 5,000 of them. It's not like a huge impact on the world one way or another. I just think it's something to look at in terms of a microcosm of like his design decisions and how they're pretty, I think a lot of them are being seen as really bad decisions. But I don't think that he's like making the world a terrible place because he invented Cybertrucks or whatever. Like, that's not something that I would say makes him a bad person or something. I just think there's lots of things like technically dumb about them.
Yeah. I gotta jump. I gotta
Well, this is fun. We finally did it.
But yeah, so my points in summary are, your argument against boring and Hyperloop is just not even, I wouldn't even call it an argument. I'd call it like a hypothetical. I don't know. I think your whole, like the whole like basis of all your sentiment is that you don't believe that we have an efficient market, that you don't trust like financial institutions, and it's not just you, that a lot of, whenever anyone says, "Oh, Tesla is overvalued," it's like there is a value. It's
no, I think that would be productive. Like,
if the Big Mac is overvalued, then here's what efficient market hypothesis means. If the Big Mac is overvalued, if it's $5 and it should be $3, then Americans will go into Burger King and they'll say, "This costs too much. I don't want to pay for this." And then Burger King will have to lower their prices until they find a price that people want to pay for. And that's market equilibrium, is you lower or raise prices based on consumer willingness to pay.
If certain assumptions are met about the market, that holds true to varying degrees.
Yeah, but so there's like a whole, the price is wrong. That's not how it works. The prices are perfect, because if they weren't perfect, they would go lower based on, and if they were too low, they'd go higher. And so they are what they are. And then the same goes for the value of a company. Like Tesla is valued at $500 billion because some people's, anyway. And then what else? Yeah, and then the whole thing about him, is he technical? Is he a founder? If you want to start to be philosophical and think about should we attribute the success of a company to a CEO or to the developers, then sure, you can go there. But when you make a comment about him in particular, I would just say, compare him against Bezos or Zuckerberg or anyone else, or Larry Ellison or Sergey Brin or whoever, and I think he stands out as being able to make more of an impact over a longer period of time on multiple different companies as a very technical person, much more technical than Steve Jobs. So my biggest problem with him, which you didn't talk about, is his rhetoric. I think he lacks the social etiquette to rein in what he's saying, and it's really damaging him, and people don't always give him
retweeting like Nazi stuff, and
it's horrible. It's horrible. Horrible. And I think there's some.
No, that I think he does great. Actually, I think he should do more of that.
Yeah. No, I think there's some cases where, I don't want to get into the rhetoric, but look, that's a big problem for him, and he's so fixated on free speech that he's losing sight of the nuance of how to be just a normal, a nice.
You can believe in free speech and still try to push for good speech. You can believe in free speech but not think that you actually should say bad things or something. You can still.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think he's got and I think some things I actually do give him the benefit of the doubt in some cases where I think he actually hasn't intended to say things as awful as they are written or come off, and the reason I think that is because then when he explains himself, sometimes his explanations seems authentic, but he says things he doesn't need to say. Same thing, same criticism people have of Trump. Trump has all these bad qualities, and the quality of his that would be the most easy to fix is the fact that he says all this stupid shit all the time. You don't have to do that.
Oh, I think that's really interesting. Yeah, I'm gonna rate out and then we can just chat. Right. But I think it's a deep thing. I don't think Elon Musk or Trump could easily. I don't think either of them could easily stop tweeting. They both need probably more therapy than either of them has. Probably more than Trump has years left in his life. Elon Musk could maybe get there.
Yeah.
Right here, I'm gonna rate out end the stream.
All right. See ya.